Welcome to AVoice for Creators. I'm your host, Daniel Norton. In this podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about the organized chaos that is being an artist. So this idea came to me in a way that many of the ideas come to me, and maybe you as well. Not when I needed it, not when I expected it, not when I was able to take advantage of it. When we are artists, we find and seek inspiration. But many working artists will tell you that it's the work that brings the inspiration and the work ethic that makes you work when you don't necessarily want to or you're not in the place to work. That's what's going to give you long-term success. And this is not incorrect by my experience. And I think that part of the process, though, of getting to that point is to understand what it's like to be a creator and how we can capture the energy that we have when we decide we're going to do it and turn that into something that is regular and functional. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. For the purposes of this podcast, I'm going to kind of lean in the direction of you're trying to do this as a career or as a side business, but this could also just be you just want to do it seriously, right? It's any project you want to do it seriously. And one of the main problems that most of us have, unless you happen to be maybe you're retired and have a lot of time and have some wealth set aside, or you've just planned for this well, or you're young and maybe you have either some money saved away or you haven't quite reached the point where you have a lot of expenses yet. Most of us are somewhere in the middle, right? We are probably working to pay our bills. We probably have more bills than we'd like to have because we want to live the lifestyle that we want to live. But then there's this little gnawing urge at us that says, create stuff. You're at your job, you look out the window, you see some birds, and you're like, I wish I was out in the park shooting birds for National Geographic or something to that effect, right? And we think about what we would do there. But then later, when we probably could be doing it, let's say on a Saturday morning, we're not doing it because so many other things in life grab us. And because it's not our source of income, when somebody says, hey, you have to rake the yard, you can say, well, all right, I'll put off the photography now because that's just my hobby, but I'll rake the yard. But yet if it was 9 o'clock on a Monday morning and you were leaving to go to the office and they said, hey, rake the yard, you would say, I'm going to work, I can't. So one of the first obstacles and one of the first techniques that we need to do is treat our art like it is work, even if it's not making us any money. And even if we don't intend to have it make us any money, treat it like it's work in the sense that treat it like it's important. Now, hopefully, as artists, we transcend this eventually and work becomes less important and the art is even more important than the work. But I think it's easy for us to frame as adults what work means. It's important. We have to do it. We know we've talked about it in other podcasts. So framing the art like it's work is really important and putting aside time to do it. What that also means, though, is that if you are, let's say it's Thursday night and you're inspired to go out there and there's something that you could be doing or you should be doing so that you have the weekend free, and then you're just like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go shoot. And then I'll do that on the weekend, the work I was going to do Thursday night. This is not always a good idea either, because at least at the beginning, we want to give ourselves a schedule. We want to make it feel like it's a regular part of our life, make it a habit. Then later on, obviously, you can move things around. And I think that's one lesson I had to learn as I went through this, because it's very easy to get up in the morning and say, I'm inspired, I'm going to do this today. It's very hard to get up in the morning and find out you're not inspired and then still do it, right? This is where we're trying to get. So making time to do our art is important. But what about what I talked about when I started here? What about when you're just doing something and it comes to you? Oh, what do you do then? Well, there's I think he's doing a speech or a question and answer. There's a video out there of Stephen King. You'll find if you type in Stephen King advice or something. And he talks about that he doesn't like writer's notebooks. He feels like if it's a good idea, it will stick with you. This can be a scary prospect for most people because they're thinking, I have this great idea right now and I'm driving my car. I can't write it down. I won't remember it later. But I kind of tend to lean in his direction that it will come back to you. It may not come back to you when you finally get to your destination, but at some other point, it will come back. And hopefully it will come back at a point where you're able to execute it. So if we have an idea for an image, you can write it down. I'm not saying don't ever write a notebook. I do carry a notebook, but don't feel like you have to. If it's a great idea, it will come back. Get yourself in the space, the headspace where ideas are just coming. Get them flowing so that you're always having ideas, and which ones you act on will be the ones that just keep coming back time and time again. So one mantra that I always think of is, we work when we can, right? That's the creative work. We do the work, we inspire, we get notes, we draw, we think of things, we come up with, that's our inspiration, right? When we can do it. We work when we have to do it. This is important. We as professionals, artists, or even if you're doing it again for yourself, when Saturday morning comes and you've set aside this time to do the photography or the painting or whatever, you do it. You may not sit down and feel immediately inspired. You might get up in the morning and be, I don't really want to go out there. It's not that great of a day, whatever. Be ready to do it. Set your mindset the night before that you're going out to shoot. Tell people you're not going to be available in the morning. Put out set your coffee maker to come on so when you wake up, it's ready. Have your bag packed. Don't set yourself up for failure where you have to get up in the morning and pack all your stuff before you go, and then a million excuses that people start calling you and this, that. No, set yourself up. One thing that I've been doing lately is when I have something to do, which should be always, the night before I do any prep, and I also write it down. I put it down as my thing to do that day. I have a little notebook. I write down, this is what I'm doing. This way, and then I do this before the end of the day. That way, let's say it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll write down in my little notebook. I'm going to pack my gear when I get home, so that I'm going to be shooting in the morning, Saturday morning from, 9 to 11, doing bird shooting. Okay, that's it. That's my schedule. That's what I'm going to do, and then I can put it aside and work on everything else. And when I get up, I'm training myself because we're so used to having jobs and having a schedule. You've got to train yourself. There does come this Zen moment where you kind of don't need to do that, and you can kind of wander around and be like, "Oh, shoot when I feel like it." But that doesn't come to everybody and doesn't come often. So it's always good to try to give yourself the time to do it, because it's very easy to not work. It's very easy to put it off till later. It's very easy to be like, "Oh, you know what? I can get those pictures another time. Oh, it's not perfect. I don't have everything lined up." But you want to put yourself there. If you go, one thing I was doing for a while was, as you might know if you listen to the podcast, I do live streams for Adorama, generally on Thursdays. I made it a point on every Thursday to go in 5 hours before the live stream, before I set up for the live stream, that is, and do something. And some days I got there and I didn't have anything to do. And those days I found something to do. I looked around, I put my nose to the thing. I didn't get on the line, start looking. I did things that were productive. Sometimes those things were not actually shooting. Sometimes they were stuff that, I jammed my equipment back in after the last big shoot. I didn't quite get it organized, resetting that stuff, updating my software, doing my, I know this sounds very boring, but these are the things we need to do, right? Because you want to have all your stuff ready so that when you need to work, you can. I would love to hear your process. How do you set yourself up so that you will always be doing your work? And by your work, I mean your art. How do you fit it in? Do you just do it whenever there happens to be a free moment? So if you have inspiration and you have some free time, you make it happen? Or do you slot aside time? And if you don't slot aside time, why? And if you say, well, I can't because I have blah, 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 what would happen if you had a dentist appointment or something happened, there was an emergency? Would you not do that? Make it a priority, make it important, make it part of your life, and then it will become a habit to always be creating. All the information to reach the show is in the show notes. You can email avoice@dnphoto.com, send me a message, and I will talk about it or read it on the air. I got a bunch of emails from Mark, which I'll talk about in a future episode. Mark's my most prolific emailer, so thank you, Mark. I know what you're thinking right now. Daniel, how can I support the podcast? Well, let me tell you. Seriously, though, if you haven't yet, please do rate the podcast, 5 stars, and give it a review. That helps get it in front of more people. Also, sharing the podcast will do the same. If you would like to have your voice on the air, or you just want to send me a message and let me know what you think, or if you have some ideas, send me an email, avoice@dnphoto.com. And if you'd like to support the show, financially that is, you can go to my Patreon. That is also in the show notes. Go ahead and jump over there and it's got all the information and whatnot. In any case, I will talk to you soon.